Hi all, it's Emily Rand back for another LPL Corner. Today I'm happy to be joined by Kelsey Moser, the coach of 100 Thieves Academy, with which there is no conflict with the LPL, so I can bring you on a show and not have our PR team get mad about it. No, I'm joking. It's something that didn't occur to me until someone brought it up once in our internal Slack chat.
We almost qualified for Worlds from Academy.
Yeah, so
it was close.
So there you go. We would have had a conflict of interest because you definitely would have been playing one of these teams we're going to be talking about.
It was definitely a possibility.
I know. All right. We're off to a great start here. So for those that were not watching LPL quarterfinals, we had Suning beating Victory 5. And that's actually where we're going to start because we're going to preview the matchup tonight of Suning versus Top Esports. So first of all, Kelsey, did you expect Suning to be here over Victory 5?
No, and I will tell you why. Okay, so I feel like the way that Victory 5 work is that they just play something super utility based that gets proud bot. So the way to beat Victory 5 is to counterpick support. I feel like I talk about counterpick support a lot. This is like the year of counterpick support. Anyway, you counterpick support and then you fuck their jungle, okay? That's how you beat Victory 5. I did not expect that Suning with Sword Art was going to counterpick support. And they did. Hooray. The end.
The end. The Nautilus brought them victory.
It was actually
the
so
Morgana
strange.
too, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. I mean, Suning is Sword Art's champion pool is so strange. I feel like it's very comfortable in LPL because, realistically speaking, people don't really play mages that much. Mages not that much, but if you want to counter Sword Art's champion pool, you just blind Morgana. What does he do? I don't know, man. That's the question.
So I actually think, so one of the reasons I also did not expect Suning to be here, by the way, for many reasons, one of them being like, even when Suning's players have been playing like individually well, like I look across the board and I'm like, none of these players have been like super bad. Like I know, sure, Sopham has his moments, but like that's how he's always been, and he has some really great moments as well. Like as again, kind of how he's always been. I don't think he's played like particularly out of character throughout the split. I looked at this team and I was just like, okay, like I can't really find a ton of fault in them individually. They're just not, for whatever reason, I don't know, like they're not working together as a team. I don't really think sometimes they have a great game plan going into a game. But one thing I will say that I think is working in their favor now is that, to your point, to the counterpick support's point, Sword Art's like champ pool right now and like kind of play style right now, because of the changes that have been made in the 80 carry like champ pool meta, is that it's a lot more feasible, in my opinion, to have him roaming. And that is where Sword Art thrives, as opposed to like Victory 5, who I think were a lot more about the like laning 2v2 and having that be super strong. And sometimes they'd even get their own advantages without having Mole or Weiwei come down for them. I don't know if you disagree with that, but that's something that I think Victory 5, like maybe didn't catch them off guard, but I think that shift was not in Victory 5's favor, and I did not realize it until after I watched this series.
I think yes and no, actually. So I think PP God's timers are really good. So like when he backs and then goes mid, and then he actually exerts a lot of pressure on the map. And the reason why it seems like they're playing so hard for lane is it's just like it's a timer support differential because they're getting prio, and then they're allowing their support to roam more because the other one has to be at a tower to avoid missing XP, or he'll get first roam or first move. And they've actually played like much better for the jungle matchup. So I don't think like Wei Wei is like a jungle god, but I think that the way V5 plays to enable him with prio lanes is a lot better. And so that's like kind of the crux of the PP god Wei Wei dynamic, I guess. It feels so strange saying those names. I've never actually
Together.
had
Yeah.
a podcast before, but I've heard other people and laughed at them, and now it's me. So there you go. But I think it's yeah. So it also was a different look from V5 as well because they were like blinding support and counterpicking top lane, which I don't think is the best plan for them. Like it obviously worked okay for them in the FPX series,
Yes.
but I think so the AD pool has gotten like really trolled. I think that probably by Worlds time we'll see people being willing to pick champs like Jinx and the Caitlyn. So we can see the AD pool evolve more. But right now it's like teams are banning Caitlyn, and a lot of the talk about around this is that Caitlyn is OP, you know? Like you either play with her or you deny her. But the problem with Caitlyn is that she's right now like the only kind of front to back carry in bot lane that we're realistically seeing since Aphelios was gutted. And yes, he was, right, Games? Aphelios was gutted. Aphelios is not a champion anymore. Thank you very much. And then since Aphelios was gutted and like LPL has not really liked Ezreal out of like a few teams that are just good so they can stat check people, like TS. So LPL has never really liked Ezreal because they like having prio through bots so they can stack dragons, force skirmishes, play for jungle, stuff like that. So they've never been super into Ezreal. So the only bot carries right now that are like somewhat meta are Caitlyn, Ezreal. You ban Caitlyn, people don't really like Ezreal. So they're gonna play like Ashe, Jhin, Kalista.
We'll get into that later.
It's just more about enabling dive, right, than actually being the carry.
Yeah.
So she's maybe like the closest thing to an AD carry. So you're looking for teams to prio like a carry position in either jungle, top, or mid. And LPL is interesting as well because they're not super focused on like jungle carry outside of like they're upset outside of Nidalee. I would say Nidalee is like the big one. Outside of jungle carry, the option they focus more on like Olaf, Trundle Lee Sin, which are just about enabling skirmishes, and then it's like top or mid carry, right? So they're looking at Bubu suddenly.
Because he did well against Gimgoon in that one game. So I will say, like,
it works well against FEX, right? But that's not the strategy I would take as Victory 5 in general.
Yeah.
TLDR.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say is because I brought this up last week because I thought it was really interesting that they discovered that they could do this against FPX because I thought that was actually really smart. And I pointed it out last week as like, okay, we trust that Bubu will be able to, you know, basically beat Gimgoon in lane with this strong laning matchup. And that was not the play against Bin. Because, I mean, I think not only is there like a skill difference there, regardless of Bubu's improvements.
Bin is just better.
Bin is actually like very quietly, I think, one of the better top players in the league.
I have a lot of respect for him, yeah, for sure. I think like teams like TS and Suning, they play like blind carry tops, which is pretty good. It's pretty nice thing to have because I feel like right now globally the highest value counter picks are like top and support, but if you can play like Jace and stuff like that blind and win lane against almost any counter, you're in a really good position to just like have a counter pick support spot open, right? So I think the thing that is really telling about this V5 series is that the game they won, yes, they gave counter pick top, yes, they camped top, but they had a jungle carry pick, right? And then otherwise it was like Trundle Olaf and not ideal.
Yeah. So like I guess I kind of want to stay in the top lane for a bit just because I think TES 369 at the beginning of the season is I would have said would be best top in LPL without question, especially since Zoom is kind of having a rough time of it and they're in JDG's first two series. But I feel like, again, with top lane shifts that have happened, I feel like the most, not dramatic is probably the wrong word to say it, but like going into LPL playoffs, as we've been looking at how the patches have come along, I feel like the main differences have come in, or the things that have been changing drafts the most have been the bot lane, like the Caitlyn that we just talked about, but then also top. How do you see this playing out between these two teams and like whatever top lane focus they want to have?
So yeah, I think if you can play 1-3-1 or 1-4, it's really good. You're in a really good position as a team. You're probably more dynamic. And if you have a strong jungle carry, you're probably a more dynamic team as well. So talking about Suning, even though people would historically say SFM is a strong jungle carry, I feel like this guy has been playing like Olaf, and he is really... Actually, this series was really funny to watch because it was like these most kind of like 5-head strategies that were really just running it down. Like I really liked game 3. It was really interesting because it was no one wards, no one leashes. And then SFM was passing up as Olaf towards his GP lane. And GP can get prio in that lane, but he was giving push to Renekton. Renekton can get prio if he trades HP, but Renekton wasn't even trading HP, right? To get prio, GP was just giving it. And then he was pathing up towards that lane. So Trundle was probably thinking, okay, like Olaf starting blue because it's more comfortable and a faster clear, because in the Trundle-Olaf matchup, Olaf can clear before crab spawn, like full clear before crab spawn and get level 4. And then that way, that's like the window where Trundle can't really fight the crab that Olaf's on that side, right? Because Trundle will only be level 3 at the timing. So he was probably thinking like Olaf is looking for the efficient clear from blue to go up. Olaf can realistically actually also path to bot in that scenario because both his mid and bot should get prio initially. And then if he's pathing like that, then he's only level 3 probably, and Trundle's level 3 and Trundle has an advantage there, but then he has the 2 prio lanes. But Trundle's like, you know, I'm going to be level 3, I'm going to go for bot crab, and Olaf full clears recalls, buys jungle item, because he's like, if this guy is here, he's going to die, right? And he's like booking it down to river, like spam pinging, and then his Jhin and Nautilus, like Trundle walks to the lane, and his Jhin and Nautilus like walk towards the Trundle, and Trundle's like, yeah, Olaf's not here. They wouldn't be walking at me if Olaf was here, right? Like, what are you thinking? He actually, and then he just walks back and dies, and it was just like, okay, if you get the fast play, maybe it's good. But Zoe has prio. I don't know, man. It was like these jungles trying to mind game each other in the least efficient way possible, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
I feel like that's where SFM comes out ahead. That's where SFM comes out ahead, though. Because like he does this kind of stuff all the time, and it's just that it usually doesn't work because his opponent will do the smarter thing.
Yeah. I understood. It was just very strange because I think Karsa will not do the smarter thing either. So if we're talking specifically about the matchup, like Karsa pass for counter gank, which is really strange. Because in this meta, it's bad. Definitely bad because you can lose like half of your jungle if you do that. For sure. But the last time I saw Suning in TES play, SFM didn't capitalize on that. Right? So it's really strange that this doesn't get punished more. Because if you're pathing for count, like I think that's the weird thing about LPL jungling is they don't behave as if, outside of like picking perma-banning Nidalee, it's like, okay, if we perma-ban Nidalee, we don't have to acknowledge that there was a change to jungle XP. We can just play like it's spring. That's basically what they do.
Which is pretty much, what they've been doing. Or what everyone but Invictus Gaming did. Which again, we'll get to later. I think, so I think for me, this is, even though I didn't expect Suning to be here, I feel like this is going to be a lot closer of a match than maybe like people who might not have watched top esports. Because I feel like everyone who hasn't watched them in the back half of the split is like top esports, auto best team. they're definitely going to win. You know, they'll make it to finals again. This is their split. And I kind of just generally like want it to be their split, especially after watching them play in the first half. But I feel like this team has a lot of holes. One of them being, so like everyone points out, I feel like the first thing everyone always points out is Jackie Love's like, I guess, coin flip nature in going for skirmishes and team fights because it's like really visible. And yes, like that can be a problem sometimes, but for me, it is just like you said, Karsa's pathing. And I'm really curious to see how this, like in my notes when I was like prepping for the series, maybe it's just because I look at junglers, but like the SFM Karsa matchup is the one that I circled, and I was like, this is the thing I'm really, really interested in because I feel like on top of SFM having like, again, he plays a very specific style, but I feel like right now he has a slightly better read on what to do in the jungle, as weird as that sounds. But also I think that Sword Art, because Karsa's pathing can be pretty predictable, I think Sword Art should have, in my opinion, a good read on what Karsa wants to do as well. And then it comes down to, can top esports basically like, I don't want to say it's brute force, because whenever I say like brute force, it calls to mind a team like IG who plays really simply for pushing lanes and then really just tries to destroy you with mechanics. And I don't think top esports are necessarily that team. But I do wonder if that's what it's going to come down to, if it's just going to come down to top esports wanting to out team fight Suning. And in that case, I'm going to find it really interesting because I also think that one bot laner who's benefited from this in terms of talking about how I think the current bot lane meta has affected Sword Out, I think Huanfeng is like very, very comfortable in this bot lane meta right now. Like he looks like, I didn't ever think that Huanfeng looked bad. Like since he's come onto the stage, I think he's looked pretty good actually. But in this bot lane meta specifically, I think he's really thrived. And the team seems to know how to set him up really well. And that suits this current meta like really, really well. So I still want to give the edge to top just because of like, I feel like in my mind, I know that they're better players, but I feel like this is going to be way closer than I initially expected.
So I think the top struggles from what we talked about before, which is the elimination of bot lane carries, for sure.
Yeah.
With Jackie Love being, I think, probably right now the best currently playing AD in LPL in terms of skill. So that sucks. But if they get Caitlyn, right, they've managed to, then I think that they're in a pretty good position overall. Just because they can still play like that. They're like the stat check team because they'll play like Ezreal Caitlyn and then they can front to back with those picks. So it's a lot of their games have been, okay, Ezreal got his items. He's unkillable now, guys. I guess we win the game. And you can kind of do that with Caitlyn if you're a good Caitlyn player. So it's like Caitlyn's in such a weird position since 10.15, which is the Caitlyn patch where she got 80 buffed and Aphelios was destroyed. Because now you can build for just flat AD items, and this gives her better builds because her ramp up time, her attack speed ramp up is like bad, and then plus she benefits a lot from flat AD with like her headshot passive, etc. And then her mid game is basically just, she no longer has a mid game trough, right? So you don't have to super hard accelerate the
That's
lane,
the big thing.
which means that you can just blind this champ. And then yes, like Ashe plus counterpick support. So Ashe plus counterpick support on red side can beat her and take like 2 towers if you're good, right? So that's what teams have played for. And then I think it was actually, was it Suning? I'm trying to remember the team that played against TES that did this. It may have been WE actually, where they pry out Ashe and then they took like two towers in TES's face, and then Caitlyn was still able to be relevant as the game went on. I think that given that information, if TS gets either Caitlyn or Ezreal, then they'll be able to exploit kind of the mid-game weakness that I think Suning has, which is their deep aggressive vision is really, really good, but their flanks are almost always open. Like they're really bad at using sweepers to clear out vision behind them. So they get flanked on really, really easily in mid-game. So I think that that's something that I've seen consistently and they just haven't fixed, right? Even in the most recent series against B5, I think it was a game where B5 like almost came back in. Was it game 2? Almost came back in just because they were able to get behind them on a dragon and fight like that. So I think that that's still open to them, and that's actually how TES beat Suning the last time too, in game 2.
Even though those I was gonna say those games were like, you look at that series and you're like, Suning really should have won this.
Yeah, but that's like the big exploitable. Also, I remember there was another moment where it was like against Prio, SFM comes and hits a pink ward in Karsa's face, and I'm just like, you're actually doing this, right? Like you're just gonna throw the game right here. Nice.
Again, not out of character at all.
It's just it's so weird because I remember these were the two junglers that were rising up when scuttlecrafts were first introduced, because they were the ones who like forced their teams to prioritize double scuttles like every game. And now I just watch them and I'm just like, you guys are running it down to counter gank and both scuttles are still up. What is going on? Like, I don't know what's happening to you guys. They've lost their minds.
Oh my god.
But yeah, I think the other thing is if TS realize that they can just blind Morgana and that will counter everything Sword Art can pick, well, pick and play well, I should say. Like he might try to pick like, so Karma also getting nerfed I think is pretty big in terms of Morgana's rise in priority, because realistically now it's like Senna is decent into Morgana, and then like some other mages are good into Morgana. But I don't think Sword Art is going to play either of those things. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one for sure. But I think that like the way for it's almost easier for TES to win in my mind. I think Suning just has to do so much more, whereas TS can kind of like chill, lose 3 towers, and win the game later.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the annoying thing about TES is that like, I think I'm still picking TES to win. I'm going to say it's going to be 3-1. I think with like one of those games being super close, like their in-season series where it's like, oh, wow, Suning, you really should have taken this. I think for me, it does come down to the fact that ultimately, I also still think, and one thing that I guess piggybacks off of the meta shifts we've talked about, is that I still think that TES are a stronger team fighting team than Suning are by like a really significant margin. And
they're the best front to back team in league, so
and I think the meta, like the recent meta shifts change absolutely nothing about that, and in fact like can help them for reasons that we've already talked about with Jackie Love. So I don't know. I'm going TES 3-1. I don't know what you want to go for moving on to the next one.
The thing about TES is that I feel like teams feel obligated to ban 3 mid laners against them, right? So that opens up the strategy that they want, which they can only realistically do with 2 AD picks. So theoretically, a better strategy against TES would be to give Knight whatever he wants as long as it isn't Syndra, and then ban like Caitlyn, Ezreal. And then they can't team fight as well. So I think that that's like a better way to approach it, but they probably won't. So
we'll see if Suning do that. We'll see if TES figure out that they can counter Sword Art through champions. Let's move on to the black hole of I don't even know. IG and LGD met each other. Yeah, IG and LGD met each other in the other quarterfinals match.
Yeah.
And Kelsey and I have talked a lot about Invictus Gaming, like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We've also talked a lot about LGD actually, but you have to go back like to 2015 to find those China Talk pods because we haven't talked about them in a really long time because they haven't made it to any sort of international competition since.
Relevant. The roster is completely different.
Yeah, so. It's absolutely not relevant. But the big thing is that they met each other in a series, and true to form, IG just were absolutely rolled. They decided to tunnel on picking Kalista Bot for Puff, and leave up Nidalee for Peanut twice. So like the first time you're just like, okay, maybe you're like, we forgot that A, this is like a really strong champion just generally right now in the LPL, but B, that Peanut, it's like one of his like known signature champions. And and honestly, like when LGD have been winning games throughout the split, I think it's pretty often been on the back of mid jungle, so Shea and Peanut. I think you look at this and they're like, okay, we give Nidalee the Peanut once, whatever. They give it to him in a second game, which I think is the more egregious thing. And they're like, okay, it's already like the Shy Lucian time. And we're still picking Kalista.
Do you know what's I mean, people were pointing out the Peanut Nidalee, but do you remember Sia was originally a Twisted Fate one trick. So
yep, Twisted Fate and Diana.
The champ was actually right? perma-banned against him for the early parts of the split. Yeah, and I also think this combo is like pretty good together. I think the way that they were playing it was sort of forced, which was like TF actually gave push to Rookie in the first game to try to set up like a fight. But the problem with this matchup is that if you're playing like range versus melee to not crash on the third wave, then the wave's going to be in a position where Silas can actually win the 2v2 level 3 with Kindred. So them trying to set that up and force it and giving Silas level 2 first felt really bad to me. But I could see what they were doing, and then they played it better after that, not into Silas, so it was fine. But like they're really just playing for level 2 fights. Not level 2 fights, but they're really just playing for like early ganks around mid, which it's a different way of playing through mid jungle than I think a lot of people think, especially with TF. With TF, stuff you're seeing for normally is like third wave crashes into roams to a side lane, usually top right now, just because of the state of bottom. And then also TF is really good in 1-3-1 comps, so there's usually like a carry top with TF. And then after that, you're just like constantly looking to like the jungler just walks into enemy jungle and tries to start a fight right after level 6, basically. Which is not how they're playing it. They're playing TF as like set up for mid lane ganks, which is a little bit weird, but I can see it being effective against teams like JDG, who play for, okay, we're just going to push mid lane, right? And so like TF is basically, Shia's going to try to set up a freeze if you're just like playing for perma push, and then create like a situation where Peanut is coming, and if they have a winning mid jungle 2v2, then they can probably kill you go. I'm just saying.
Well, especially if they, and I imagine, because it's not a secret, I assume that they will be like it's been really apparent on JDG that if you ban out certain mid lane champions against Yagao, that your, the mid lane pretty much collapses a lot of the time. So
when you're trying not to call a player bad, your voice has like a special tone.
I'm too nice. Yeah. Okay. So
it's like obvious to anyone listening what you think about this player, so you should just say it. That's all I'm saying.
Toothface has a champion pool problem, and most teams have recognized this. Based on, I mean, LGD, I think they draft more for themselves, but I also think that they will, be easily be able to recognize that they can ban out these champions against Yagao, and it drastically improves their chances of winning. And to your point, the way that they play around it to have Shea be more of like a, I don't want to say standard carry, but I feel like people have used Doinby as this weird shortcut of pushing the wave and then roaming mid. Like everyone says that's like Doinby style, even though there's like so many different ways to do it. But I think the other big thing that you mentioned that I want to mention about LGD specifically is that typically in the setup, you do want to put your top laner on more of a carry. Longsheng has, I mean, as much as people joke about his apparently like Diamond 2 solo queue count, has not been
flat, so it's whatever.
Yeah, it's, hey, you know what? He made it. He made it to the point where he could still stay in the LPL. That was the important part. I think the big thing with Longsheng is that we've not really seen him be super successful on carries since his Suning days. And this is where LGD were like, okay, and I don't even think he performed like super, super well. Like, I don't think it was like, whoa, Longsheng's really taking over this game. He's suddenly like the carry top to watch out for. I don't think it was that drastic of a shift, but I did find it interesting that they were able to put him on more carry oriented picks like the Camille and have it be successful, because I feel like he has been, I would say, one of the weaker links on this LGD roster all year, or all split rather.
Can I just say how much I like this team? Like, I really, it's crazy because it's like all of my favorite old pieces.
I was gonna say Mark coming to this team. I feel like you must have been so happy.
Anyway, I think so. And then Kramer and Peanut are like randomly thrown in, but whatever. Yeah, this series was so strange because I usually think of, LPL as they play really aggressively 4-lane. Like red side is a commonly picked side in this region, which in NA it's just like blasphemous. When I'm thinking about picking red, it's like they give you side select, and obviously the default is blue, and I'm just like, if I put in red and I lose, I look even more dumb. But the thing is that if your team is actually good at laning, like red side is good. And that's why LPL traditionally has more success on red side than any other region. But I was just watching the series and I was like, no lane is going the way it should. At all. Like, I was just surprised that Ezreal was allowed to live versus Kalista.
Yeah.
In any of these games. Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting series from that perspective because I was like forced to question everything I thought I knew about champion interactions. But
I feel like I'm returning to your stream with Veteran where Puff had just won the LPL bot laner of the split. And you like proceeded to like poop on Puff for like a good like half hour after that. Yeah, I mean, I think
so. Like the fact that you're not building IBG into like third item a lot of times on Israel's now really increases the window in which Kalista can punish this champion. So the fact that he was just even CS, and I didn't see how the lane went, but I saw like snippets, and there were definitely times where it was just like just flash on him and he dies. Like it was really strange actually. But I don't know what the deal was there. I think maybe it was just, maybe they're a team that if they ever create bot dive scenarios, it has to go through mid jungle first. And so LGD going through mid jungle eliminated that, but that doesn't mean that you don't functionally know how to play your bot lane matchup, I guess. So I was just kind of confused. But, it happened. Stuff exists. I think maybe my favorite part of that series, though, in general, was when Rookie like burns a zero ulti to stop Sia's TP, and then Sia's like, well, I guess I'll just walk, lol. And then goes top and kills them anyway. It was pretty fun. That basically summed up the entire series.
I feel like, yeah, that
he was trying, and then the team's dying anyway, so.
Yeah. I mean, I never know. Like, I don't want to say this is over for IG because, like, with our luck, they'll come out and they'll just, like, smash FPX and they'll beat whoever they face in
I
the...
just want to say that Rookie looked like a joke compared to Fun last year at the same time and still made it to Worlds and still made it to World
That's true.
Semifinals. So you really can't, like, everyone was playing bad versus, but I felt like Rookie was actually trying the series, so they look even better than they did this time last year. So crazy.
Yeah. Well, one of them or
Congrats on sending
FPX is
IG.
not going to Worlds.
No, someone asked me, do I think IG or FPX is going to Worlds? And I said, if I say IG, it won't be IG. If I don't say IG, it'll be IG. So I can't answer this
Yeah,
question.
you can't. It's just IG they exist.
Yeah.
LGD moving forward. So I think like the big question that I was asking myself after the series is that is LGD finally like finding their stride? Because like if you look at this lineup on paper, like not just the names on it, but like the way these players play, you're like theoretically this should work. Like this should work on paper. They kind of lost their minds a lot of the time in the mid to late game throughout the season. They looked so much better against IG and then also against WE, but that like I was expecting that series to just be like a kind of sloppy back and forth where one of them comes out ahead because I didn't believe in either team because LGD had been so inconsistent up until that point. Is this LGD finally coming together, or is it just that IG have these series where they forget how to draft, where they just really seem to forget like fundamentals of the game itself for whatever reason? And is that giving us like a false sense of who LGD are going into this JDG matchup? And then I think about JDG and I'm like, here's another team that I'm like, I feel like this team has some very glaring weaknesses in it. Despite the fact that they, on the back half of the season, their results have been really, really strong. I still think that this is like, for me, the matchup really honestly depends on what happens with Toothpaste. Because I feel like attacking Toothpaste is the easiest way to beat JDG, in my opinion, still. And I know I said that previously before with TES, and the reason why I bet against TES, like the reason why I bet against TES in the spring final is because I expected Zoom to be able to carry Zoom and Kanavi to be able to carry JDG. Which actually, by game 5, isn't what happened. Like, Lu Mao signed on to one of his signature champions and just had, like, the game, in my opinion, still the game of his career. Because I feel like he's still been really up and down this split as well. But, yeah, I think about JDG and I'm like, okay, this is also a team that I'm not super confident in either. And I feel like people have been equating these two teams erroneously because of their junglers. Like, people are like, okay, LGD gives a ton of resources to Peanut, and JDG gives a ton of resources to Kanavi. And I actually think that's true technically, but I think the way they use those resources is actually completely different. And I feel like if LGD want to win, I really, really think the way they play through Xie right now is actually a great way to beat JDG.
So I think the interesting thing about JDG is I feel they've benefited a lot from the meta in general this year. And that's still the case. We're removing bot lane carries pretty much from JDG. Top lane counterpick is still, like, top and support counterpick are definitely going to be their strongest counterpicks, and those are the most that you can get out of right now, I think, the counterpick role. And then they have a jungler who plays carries well, so he'll always absorb like Nidalee Graves bans, or so you can't like target Yagao's champion pool as much. So I think that JDG just benefit a lot from the meta in general. Like, if I think about an ideal team to have in this meta, it's always going to be JDG. Just like the way that their team is structured. I think that when you're talking about like playing mid jungle, and giving jungle resources. JDG do it in the way that I think is correct, as opposed to the way that LGD do it, which is just like pushing mid and invade jungle and fight the jungle, right? But the way to counter that, obviously, like, is to go through mid and fight mid, so that you can't, like, mid can't back up jungle when he's walking into jungle and fighting. So I think that LGD like naturally stylistically countered Jingdong. I'm sorry about that. Don't know why I thought I turned my phone off. Anyway, but yeah, so I think that they naturally stylistically counter. I think it gets sort of interesting when you look at top lane. I do still think Zoom is really strong, but I think, and I do think Zoom's meta is, it's still like a good meta for Zoom, because you can still play like front lines and carry as a frontliner. You can still play GP and carry as GP. Like he pulled out the Gnar, I think, in the last series JDG played into Renekton, and Renekton is like a really big pick for blind pick in LPL. So I think it's something that can feel very comfortable for Jingdong if they can play that champion, because it's everything that JDG want to do, which is like they'll play like these typical like sort of tank tops, but they'll still carry with the tank, you know. So yeah, it's interesting, but I think for sure they should be looking at like how bot lane's gonna go, saving counter pick for Lumao if possible. I think is really good. And then just have Zoom have a pressure matchup, and then use like pressure from those lanes to make sure that mid isn't a 2v2. Because if mid isn't a 2v2, because you have support timer, you have top timer, then they can't counter the way JDG wants to play that well. Yeah.
How well does like putting, because like another part of this I think is for me is Longshing, and how well do you think he has to play for them to theoretically beat JDG?
It really depends on how much pressure, basically who gets the first rotation. So the way JDG are playing, now that I've talked about like mid pressure setting up for jungle invades, they've actually been really kind of thriving in this like double ranged bot meta. They kind of see that, like they're the team that will play mages bot. They'll play a bunch of different things bot, or mages bot. I mean support mages, not AD mages, because we haven't really seen that. But they'll play a lot of different supports bot, and so they'll play like these double range meta. But the way that LPL, so the way that most regions, I think of from watching them, think of double range bot meta, they think, okay, counter pick support gets pushed, crashes on 2, crashes on 3 usually, and then gets a ward. 1 ward is saved for lane. If you start in bush, then you can cheese like level 1, stuff like that. Whereas LPL thinks, okay, the lane that gets pushed is going to get ganked by the jungler level 2.
Yeah.
So that's how JDG have been playing. I remember, I think it was the OMG series where like the Ashe was just mispositioning and got into flare range, was like giga chunked. So even though it was a double counter matchup, like it was Blitzcrank Ashe, Ashe drastically misplayed. Caitlyn was able to get the wave in, and then they dove, right? So I do think that just like making sure we're not misplaying our bot matchups the way that IG did is going to go a long way. It's like a weird thing to say, but for sure. I do think that we'll probably see gank spot, and then they'll use the pressure from gank spot to have Lumao kind of go around the map, and then if Lumao gets first roam on mid, then that should shut down the way that LGD want to play it. So
yeah, and also just it's something they do to help Yagao a lot, because it helps him be able to push up the wave and take mid control back. The other thing I'm wondering about this is whether we'll see the Lilia from Kanavi, because he played it.
Yeah.
I was looking back just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. He did play it in the OMG series twice. And I think it's a super strong pick, especially for a team like JDG, because they're, in my opinion, they're a team that can really make the most of her early pressure with the way that they play around Kanavi.
I actually think it's bad for them.
Really?
Mhm.
I disagree. Why?
Because I think Lilia is a really fast clear jungle, but if you're JDG, what you want to do is you want to go into their jungle and you want to fight them in their jungle. You don't want to fight them in lanes. You want to fight them in their jungle, ideally. If you're playing the game like to your team comp strengths. And Lilia is just paper. She has one shot. If she tries to fight someone, like she has to stack her passive first so that she has the move speed. But if she gets caught by like a Lee Sin, a Set, a Graves, a Volibear, anything like that, she's just gonna die. Like her dueling power isn't great if she isn't able to stack up her passive first. She just like benefits from fast clearing a lot. And then she's very useful in fast clear and in 1-3-1 comps. So I think she'd be useful for a team like actually I think she's not bad for might not be bad for LGD. Like that's maybe a good way to think about it, is that like Peanut will just fast clear and then he'll show up in lanes briefly, and then in that sense he'll probably have like used passive already set his passive when he shows up. He'll be hard to kite, but he'll have like gank pressure there, and then his laners will kill opponent laners. But I think the way that you want to play, if you want to win the series, you don't want to play Lilia if you're JDG, because you need to rely on Kanavi's power as a duelist.
Yeah, see, I was going to argue that it would be bad for LGD because I think despite what you just said, I don't think that's always how Peanut plays. I think he like actually sometimes tends to over focus on counter jungling because he thinks like that is always the best way that he can help his team, like whether it's right or wrong. I think that was actually one of the changes that we saw in the IG series, to be honest. So hopefully they'll continue to play that way. But I was going to say it'd be bad for Peanut because I feel like it would just like some of his tendencies to really reach for counter jungling his opponent's camps would be punished by that same thing. So that's really interesting. We'll see. I'm like really curious to see if either of these teams pick Lilia.
Like I go back and forth constantly on like whether Lilia is like super OP or super useless. Like she's such a weird champion.
I mean,
like, oh great, I stack my passive and I'm impossible to kill and I'm really annoying in poke ops, I guess, but otherwise I'm just like paper, and if you ever get on top of me because every LPL team has like a million like hard engage sources and just, like, dive, then I just instantly die and it doesn't matter how much gold I have. So yeah, I don't really know. Like I have to get back to you on whether or not she's useless or OP. Like,
well, we'll see
if oscillate between those two.
Yeah, we'll see if Navi or Peanut play her. I'm assuming Italy is just going to be permabanned between both of these teams. It's been banned against both teams, or they've banned it. So I assume that will continue.
I think LGD is like a much better poke and 1-3-1 team than Jingdong is. So that's another reason why I think Lilia is better. She just like fits compositionally with how they play out the map better.
That makes sense. Who do you, I mean, I still want to say it's going to be JDG, but I think this is going to be a 3-2. And I also will be, I think I'll be more surprised if, I'll definitely be more surprised if TES lose to Suning than I will if JDG lose to LGD, actually. Something I did not think I'd be saying at the beginning of this playoffs.
I think Luma and Mark are both really great players, and I'm excited for this format.
You're literally just excited to see who gets the 4 counter pick. You're just like,
counter pick. This is all that matters, okay? No, I do think bot lane will matter a lot more in this series because I felt like IG's bot lane just sort of rolled over and died.
Yeah, they did.
And then
sort of.
It was basically like LGD won the mid jungle 2v2 and exerted pressure top, and then bot lane was a non-factor. So like, I think that in this series, bot lane will be way more relevant. And then, yeah, I really don't know. I feel like no matter what happens top lane, like if LGD played a top in this series, I feel like Zoom will still be relevant, probably have more impact on the game. So I'd rather they just like try to match mid with faster rotations from support. I think if they do that, they can do well.
Yeah, I think if JDG want to attack topside, I don't necessarily think they will, but if they do, like if they decide to go that route, I think that Longsheng will kind of get rolled over based on how he's been playing, even in his most recent series. But then I think if, to your point, I think if LGD focus it, it takes away from where they can attack elsewhere, which in my opinion is mid lane. All right.
I think I'll make the same mistake I did last year when we were talking about like the final, I think, between TES and JDG. And I'll predict against JDG because I think that LGD is actually better. But I also do think JDG just paid off the balance team, and the meta is way too in their favor for them to lose. But I'll still bet on LGD anyway to win. So there you go.
All right. Well, we'll see. I was right last time, and I honestly thought I was going to be wrong after that Night Cinder game where I was just like, oh my god.
No. I mean, TES just have the biggest hand stiff, like in every world possible, basically.
I was just like, oh no, my predictions, but then I ended up being right.
Which is not even fair because TES's hand stiff in every role except support is so huge. So Lumao literally had to 1v9 to win the game, and he did. Congrats,
he did
Lumao.
He did it Hooray. On his signature champion. After I had made fun of him for not having hands on like half the champions, so I looked really stupid.
Congrats.
I know, right?
The problem was just that the support diff, it didn't matter if he had hands or not because his opponent was not great, but that's fine. It's fine, you know? Stuff happens.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I always love talking League of Legends about you. Hopefully we can do this more now that you are not in season. I'm sorry.
Thank God you laughed at me.
I know. I was just, as that sentence was coming out of my mouth, I was just like, this is not a nice thing to say.
Wow. I'm just, now that you've gotten that thing that you call your job out of the way.
I know, right? You can do content with me.
All right. Thanks, Emily, for having me on. I'm looking forward to the game. If you're watching it live, I'll probably message you.
Yeah, I will be screaming on Twitter. And also, I mean, I'll be awake, so.
Yeah. All right.
See you guys.